Hello, 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 and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. The way I'm like, hello, is because, to be completely honest with you, fully transparent, I have COVID right now. Although it did feel good to get out of bed and actually put on some makeup, feel a little bit more human again. But I do have COVID, in case you can't tell from the congestion. I am extremely blessed that it's not a bad case. I haven't been suffering through it, no fever or chills that I know, that I've experienced. Just kind of tired and congested. And I just thought it was because I traveled. Last week, I was in Spain for the Wellbeing Summit, which was absolutely amazing. And of course, jet lag can do a number on our bodies. And so that's what I thought it was for a few days. I kept testing to see if it was COVID, kept saying negative. And then finally, yesterday morning, I got what I suspected it was after all the other theories that I tried, which was that I've got COVID. So my first time, I'm now part of the COVID club. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you, scientists. Thank you, vaccines, because I know that if I were not boosted, this would be a lot worse. So I'm just really, really grateful for that. All right. So now that I've told you about my COVID journey of the last few days, I do want to tell you about an experience that I had while I was at the Wellbeing Summit. So the Wellbeing Summit is a summit that's focused on well-being of change makers. And so, of course, since my work is inner work for greater good, and I'm all about change makers, those of us who are trying to make a positive difference in the world and really focusing on our own self-care, our own inner well-being, our emotional well-being, obviously I had to be there. I actually had to move around a lot of things, other conflicts in my schedule to make it possible to get myself to Bilbao, Spain. But I got to Bilbao, which, by the way, if you've never been to Bilbao, it's the city where there's the famous Guggenheim Bilbao, the Frank Gehry sculptural museum that was erected 20 something years ago. And it's a beautiful city, and they have done so many amazing things with their city for the sake of having a higher living experience, higher life experience for the people, a quality of life for the people who live there, as well as, of course, for the people who visit. And so it's an absolutely beautiful city. They have arts everywhere. And this event, the Wellbeing Summit, I can see why they chose Bilbao as an example of a city that's really working to create greater well-being among its citizens. Bilbao is in the Basque region of Spain, and so they have their own language. Like, it's just really it's in the mountains, it's near the ocean, it's such an incredible place, so I highly recommend it. But anyway, the Wellbeing Summit was put on by a number of organizations that sort of came together in what's called the Wellbeing Project. And it includes Ashoka, which is all about, actually, they coined the term change makers. Synergos, it's all about really bridging leaders and making sure that we have healthy leadership. It was begun by a wonderful woman named Peggy Delaney, who I had the pleasure of meeting during the summit. And so it was a bunch of us change makers and people who are focused on well-being, and also artists and people who are all about arts and culture. We all came together for this 3 to 4 day event to really focus on well-being and the well-being of those of us who were trying to make a difference. So as you can imagine, I had really amazing conversations with amazing people from all over the world who were doing wonderful work. And I want to share with you one particular conversation I had that was anyway, really an interesting conversation that basically inspired the title of this particular episode, which is, I won't curse, but the title is "They Don't Effing Care." And what do we do when they don't effing care? So I'll just give you a little background. This conversation happened between me and this man, who, when we first saw each other in the crowd, we had this kind of funny mix-up because we thought we were in the same family group, and we ended up not being in the same family group. But it was just this wonderful sort of accidental thing that brought us together, and yet we really, really connected. I mean, you know how when you can see someone who you see their face and there's just light there's just this love and light that comes from their face. This is what this man has. I'm not going to say who it is because that would also reveal the organization that I'm going to mention. And I don't want to talk about specifics just for the sake of, confidentiality. But it was, we ended up sitting down for several hours after one of these sessions during the event. And we just started talking. And I forgot how we even got on the subject. But he was telling me this. He told me basically that he'd been part of this organization, and it's a very, very well-known, very well-known organization. You absolutely 100% know the name of this organization that's been around for a very, very, very long time. It is the center of a lot of power in the world. And so anyway, this man had been part of that organization, and it was really fascinating to hear him talk about how he came in with all of these great ideas and this great, enthusiasm and really wanting to make a difference. And he has his particular causes in which he wants to make a difference. And so he jumped in and started to, get involved in all these activities and create events and do these wonderful things. And the person who's head of this organization was very supportive and wonderful. And you have heard of this person, but the point is they were a really wonderful human being. They really were supportive of this man's efforts. But the people around him were not. They may have sort of seemed like they were, or, and ironically, of course, this is an organization that's all about supposedly trying to make a positive difference in the world. And yet what this man found is that, nope, these people were not interested, and actually on the other, by contrast, they were actually trying to sabotage his efforts. So as I'm telling you his story, and I'll tell you some of my story that relates to his, I just think about times when you've been in a situation and you have come in with all of your great, wonderful energy and effort, and you've wanted to make a big difference, and you have such a big heart, and you really try to enact change, and yet you keep running into resistance. You keep running into people who are, inordinately cynical or skeptical of you, or even try to sabotage what you're doing for any number of reasons. It could be because they're threatened by your light, they're threatened by your energy, they feel like that you're making them look bad because here they are really not doing that much and here you are doing a lot. There are all kinds of reasons why we get these saboteurs in our lives and in organizations where we're trying to do good. But so as I'm telling you this, just think about the times when you've had these experiences, and I know I have, and I'll share a little bit about that. But the point is that he really burned out as a result of trying to basically fight this pre-existing system that really didn't want to change. And even though he was getting support from the person in charge, there was still all this other political stuff that was causing problems for him on a daily basis. He was able to bring in good staff, but there were still people in power around him who didn't like what he was doing for all kinds of reasons. And so they actively, boycotted his events, et cetera, et cetera. The point is that, so he was sharing his story and how he had burned out from that and how he eventually had to leave because it just wasn't healthy. And he had made some good changes, but it was at his own expense, the expense of his own well-being. In fact, a lot of the conversations I had, a number of them that I had at the summit, were with change makers who had reached some kind of burnout, or who had never even thought about self-care because they were always so focused on trying to make a difference. We've talked about this a lot, right? I talked about this a lot on my shows, that as change makers, we can be so supremely, fixated on trying to make a difference in other people's lives that we end up diminishing our own needs and our own feelings. We end up ignoring the fact that we even have needs. And so that's why we end up burned out. So long story shorter, the point is he ended up really burned out. In the midst of this conversation, I also shared an experience that I'd had, and I don't remember how much, if I've shared this on any of my episodes before. But in my own case, I was in a situation that was in a more personal, more like my personal life. Some issues there in which I saw a situation that was very dysfunctional, and there was a lot of sickness. and there were things that needed to be fixed. And I jumped in with all of my good energy and all of my good intentions and goodwill and my kindness and my enthusiasm and all that good stuff, and I was like, I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to be the best person in this role that I can possibly be. And I'm going to try to help this other person do what they do and really be nice to everybody. And it, let's just put it this way, it took me a few years to finally confront the brutal facts that it didn't matter how nice I was. It didn't matter how well intentioned I was. It didn't matter how much enthusiasm I had or how gifted I was at doing X, Y, or Z. It didn't matter how helpful I was trying to be. That the system in which I was trying to make a change, it was a pre-existing system. It predated me by many years. And the sickness was already very embedded. And that there were people who were trauma bonded. There were people who were threatened by me and my life for their own reasons. And that basically I made them look bad, even though that was not my intention. I was just trying to be the best I could be. But basically it drew out their insecurities about themselves by seeing me like jumping in and trying to do these things. It made them realize, oh, these are things I should be doing, but I'm not doing. And so rather than actually try to make changes within themselves, they instead attacked me and criticized me and vilified me and demonized me. And so my point is that this man and he was talking in terms of a larger organization. I was talking in terms of a personal situation, but that we both had these experiences that ultimately burned us out. So that other experience that I had in my personal life burned me out so badly that I thought I thought I was crazy, because I was basically dealing with a crazy making situation, a situation that was making me crazy. And I became someone that I wouldn't recognize, you wouldn't recognize, just so full of anger and rage and so burned out and sad and betrayed and frustrated and everything, because I had tried my very best to make a change and make differences and be really positive. But the people involved who were already involved in the situation, they didn't want any of that. They wanted to stay in this, or at least some of them did, wanted to stay in this kind of dysfunction because that's how they had control. That's how they manipulated. And they didn't like the fact that I was basically bucking their system that they had set up that was working quite well for them, but wasn't working well for, in my opinion, and in this case, the innocent ones in the situation. So anyway, that's a long way of saying that we can end up in these situations where we are coming in with all of our good intentions, and we are coming in as change makers, or we are coming in as people who are wanting to affect a positive difference. And yet the people around us, they don't want that. And they don't care, or they don't care. And that's where this comes from. They don't effing care. That sometimes people really don't effing care about making a positive difference. They really aren't trying to make a situation better for whatever reason. And so I will tell you that in conjunction with that other story, there's also, for me, when I finally realized, and this kind of fits with what this other man and I were talking about, is that I will say for myself, and I don't want to get political, but I will just, so that I make sure clear that I'm telling the story accurately. One of the things that I'm someone who, and you may identify with this, I'm someone it's just part of me to want to make a positive difference. It's just who I am. I want to make a difference in people's lives. I want to bring positivity. I want to make our world better. In the United States, we a few years ago, of course, had a situation where we had a certain president, and we had people who supported that president. And in the election up to his presidency, I saw that a lot of people were supporting him, and I was really upset by that, because I could see that from where I sit, there was a lot of toxicity in this person, and yet they were supporting that toxicity, or rather they were supporting that person even despite his toxicity. So I had a lot of conversations. This relates to what I'm talking about. I had a lot of conversations during those years, especially during that election and even afterwards, in which I found myself trying to convince people that, but what about this? Don't you care about this? And ultimately, without getting into the details or even into the politics of it, one of the big realizations I had, and you may be sitting there watching me talk about this and think, oh, she's so naive. Or you may be like, me too. But the point is, one of the big realizations I had from that was they don't care. Like, I was trying to get people to care about, uh, basically about the people who were being hurt by this candidate's rhetoric, the people who were being hurt by this candidate and his administration's actions. I was trying to get people to care, his supporters to care. And then after banging my head against a wall and banging my head against a wall and banging my head against a wall with arguments and, and being empathetic and having these, gentle conversations, all that, I realized, what, they don't care. Now, if you are someone who supported this candidate, you might say, well, I care about other things or whatever. So I don't want to get into a political argument, but the point of it is to say that I finally realized, like, wow, there are actually people in this world who really don't care about how their actions hurt other people, or about wanting to make a positive difference, or about, like us change makers, like we change makers, we care, we want to make a difference, we want to have an impact. There are people who don't care. They don't care. They just don't care. They don't effing care about having that impact or making that difference. And I don't want to sit here and criticize those people, because that's not what this is about. It's more about the realization that those of us who really, really do care, the reality is that there are those of us who really, really do care, and then there are others who just don't care. And that part of the problem happens, and this is where it comes back to the story with this man and with me, our stories, is that here he was trying to change a system from the inside out, trying to make a difference in a system and surrounded by people who didn't care. They weren't interested in trying to make other people's lives better. They were interested in holding on to power. They were interested in maintaining their titles. They were interested in maintaining the prestige that they held in, or maybe some of them still hold, in the world. They didn't care about trying to make a cause better. They didn't care about trying to help people who were suffering from X, Y, or Z. They didn't care about things that had to do with our planet or what have you. They didn't care. They may have acted as though they cared. They may have said that, oh yes, that's what I'm here for. But what were their actions saying? They don't care. And if anything, someone comes along who is trying to make that difference, and what do? They sabotage it. Well, clearly they don't care about making a positive difference if they're trying to sabotage the person who is trying to make a positive difference. And so same with me. I was bringing all my good energy and trying to make a difference. They didn't want that. They didn't care. They were actively fighting against it. In fact, in my situation, one person who I very much care about, but this person was stuck in the sickness at the time as well. Luckily, this person was out of it. But this person said to me, it'd be a lot better if you just weren't here. I mean, it was like, wait, what? I'm trying to make this better. I'm trying to help. But I was bucking up against a system that was serving people in different, I would argue, very, very toxic and dysfunctional ways. But they kind of figured out each of them, like what, some were all about manipulating it, and some were all about just trying to, deal with the person who was manipulating. And so they had their system worked out. So it didn't matter how much I brought my, I would say, health into the situation. They didn't care. They didn't want it. And they didn't care about making it better. They just cared about the status quo and maintaining whatever positions that they had, because that's what made them feel safe or powerful or what have you. So my point is that when it comes to us, those of us who do care, and this was kind of a fun sort of realization, or sort of like declaration, I guess, that I kind of made in this conversation with this man at the Wellbeing Summit. We both realized this. Was not everybody cares. Like sometimes they just don't effing care. And that what we have to do as change makers, as people who do care, that I think part of our inner work and part of our own being really realistic and honest with ourselves and with each other, is to recognize that, to recognize when someone just doesn't care. Because otherwise, what happens is we end up wasting energy. We end up banging our heads against walls. We waste our energy trying to get the person to care or certain people to care. And we waste our energy and hurt ourselves banging our heads against those walls because we're trying to get someone to care. We're trying to get someone to wake up. We're trying to get someone to realize something that for us is just, well, yeah, duh, it's obvious. Or, maybe we had our own awakening where we realized that something was really important and needed to be addressed. And we're trying to get other people to have that. I think that a certain amount of that, a certain amount of trying to get people to care and trying to get people to wake up and realize is good. It's important. At the same time, though, if you find that it is badly, that it is degrading your sense of well-being, then you need to stop. Then this is me saying this and me speaking to myself in those situations. Stop. It's not worth it. It's not worth trying to get someone who doesn't care to care. There are ways to do it. You could talk marketing campaigns, etc. But if you're putting too much energy trying to get the people who don't care to care, then you're putting too much energy into it. And the better approach, in my opinion, is what he and I were talking about. Find people who do care, who do get it. Stop working so hard, overly hard, burning yourself out, wearing yourself out with people who just they don't get it. They're not where you are. Instead, ally with people who are where you are, who do get it. You're going to find it's a whole lot easier. And then you can create things together. You can work together and be fed by one another's energy and not be constantly struggling with, trying to get someone to be on the same page as you, because they're just not. They just aren't. Maybe they will be one day, but they just aren't right now. So that's something I want to put forward for us change makers. Get really honest with yourself. Notice when you're doing that and stop. Stop. Just go, you know what? What's the reality? This person doesn't care. Here's the other thing that's important to remember too. The fact that the person doesn't care is not a reflection on you and your message and your ability to communicate. I mean, yes, sure, sometimes there are situations where, we're not communicating clearly. But if you know that you have communicated very clearly and you know that you have tried it from every different angle and they still don't care or they still don't get it or they still aren't invested, then you need to let it go. And recognize that it is not a criticism of you. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's not that you did anything wrong. One of the things that I kept trying in my situation of trying to fix this very toxic situation in my personal life is, I would try to be nicer. I try to do my inner work and I try to fix myself. Maybe I'm just not right. And then I finally realized I could be effing Mother Teresa. And certain people in this situation would still hate me. They'd still find something to criticize. So that's what I finally realized. It's not about me. It's not that I have failed. It's not that I have done something wrong or not done something enough or I'm not good enough to get this person to care. No, they just don't care for whatever psychological reason they have or whatever stake they have in not caring. That's just the reality, and it's not a reflection on me. And so that's another element too that I want you to think about, is that if you've been banging your head against a wall or you've been burning yourself out trying to get someone to care or trying to affect change where people really don't want the change, that there can be sometimes there's some subtle unconscious things that we carry that we think that if I don't do this, then I've failed or there's something wrong with me. And I'm telling you right now, if you've already been trying and it's not working, it's not about you. It's not about you. And it's better to step back and take care of you and preserve and rebuild your own well-being so that you can keep making that difference with people who already care. There are people in the world who care about what you care about. Put that out there to the universe. Ask for them to come to you. Search on Google, whatever you got to do. Find them. Go to the Wellbeing Summit. Go to events. where you know that you can be around people who care. Speaking of which, I was even shocked that the Wellbeing Summit existed. I didn't know that there was any kind of movement about well-being for change makers. I kind of thought I was kind of not the only person in this space, but I never thought that it was any sort of big thing. I just knew that I just know that I'm really passionate about helping change makers be more healthy and happy and whole and more lit up so they can light up the world. So I was even shocked to find that. But when I found out that they existed, I was like, okay, I'm going, and moved things around and went. So that kind of thing, find the people who care about what you care about and let go of trying to get people who don't care to care. It's just not worth it. Another thing is, if you're trying to make change from the inside, right? So it's like in my case, I was trying to make change from the inside. This other gentleman, he was trying to make change from the inside, these existing institutions or family units or whatever. And we try to make change. And that is wonderful and that is worthy. And if that's what you feel called to do, then go for it, because there are all kinds of really cool ways to do that. But if you find that you're trying too hard against a system that just really is not interested in budging or changing, then you need to look at whether or not that's energy well spent. And I would argue then, if you can't transform something that previously exists, then create something new. Again, get together with people who care about what you care about and create something new together with them. You're going to have a much more joyful, happier time, and you'll have higher sense of well-being and health, emotional health doing it, because you'll feel lit up. I've been really blessed lately because that is exactly what's happening for me. I've got 2 ladies on my team now who are absolutely amazing, and they really care about what I care about, and they're really excited. One of them tells me, she's like, every time I read the description of your work, Emily, I get teary-eyed. I'm just so touched, and I'm so happy to be part of this. Another gal, we had our first meeting the other day, and she was like, after our meeting, she's a few hours ahead of me. And so she was like, it was her bedtime by the time we were done. She was after our meeting. She said, I was buzzing so much, I couldn't sleep. I was so excited. That's the people you want to be around. Not keep trying to change the people who just aren't interested or don't have a stake in changing, or maybe they just they're just not built the way you are. Not everybody's a change maker. We're not all built this way. So that's something to understand. And also ignore the haters, the saboteurs, ignore those people who try to tear down what you're doing. One of the things that the man shared with me, which I thought was wonderful, is that the leader of this organization, again, this is someone you guarantee you've heard of, and he's well respected in the world. But the point is that one of the things this man was telling me is, he said, oh yeah, the leader of the organization, he said, oh yeah, he knew what was going on. He's like, the man who I met, he said, we had a really good connection. So the 2 of them had a really good connection. They got along really well. And whereas he would get really frustrated with the toxicity and the sabotage and all that kind of stuff, the guy who was the leader, obviously he's in a different position because he's the leader of the organization. But what was cool about him is that he saw the toxicity, he saw what was going on, but he was like, whatever, not dismissing it like it doesn't matter, but more like not taking it personally, seeing the games that they were playing, seeing what they were doing or not doing in their roles, and recognizing what was going on, recognizing it for what it was, and just going, I get it, okay, and moving on and just doing what he knew he needed to do, and making the changes he knew he needed to make. And he's done some pretty amazing things in the world, this person. And so I thought that was such a cool thing to go, oh, so he sees it, but he didn't take it personally. He didn't get entangled. And from what I understand, I believe he's also even been able to remove some of those toxic people from those roles and bring in better energy. And my friend said that there are some reasons for that. But it's all by way of saying, like, there are those of us who care, and there are those of us who don't care. And those of us who care, I think the best thing we can do is recognize when, okay, it's someone who just doesn't care. It's just be honest with ourselves, get brutally honest and say, okay, I'm dealing with someone who doesn't care. So you know what? I'm gonna ally with people who do care, and we're gonna create a new and a better world together. Just not worry about those other people, because it's just not worth wasting your time or energy. They are where they are. Maybe they'll change, maybe they won't. But if you've already tried and it's hurting you, let it go. That's what I have to say. I hope this has been really helpful. I would love to hear from you if you've had experiences like this, or even if you're in a situation like this, and just hear how you dealt with it, or some of the realizations you had. And as always, I'm here to chat. Emily@changelight.world. And as always, join us on our community, and take the course, the Change Light System course, so that you can learn how to draw out all that stuff inside that causes us to get stuck in these situations that are not healthy for us, and to really light up so that we can all light up the world. That's what I teach. Join us. I'd love to have you. Anyway, thank you again. Hope you have a wonderful day. Hope this was helpful. And I will see you again next week. And here's hoping I will be completely COVID free. All right. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.